You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Well, good Sunday morning to you. I'm Renee Skinner, filling in for Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Well, with the start of 2022 came the beginning of new laws that were passed in the 2021 legislative session, from police body cameras to smokable medical marijuana. LBJ explains.
New Louisiana laws governing everything from changes to income taxes to deductibles to how police departments deploy body cameras have gone into effect. Perhaps the most consequential is the allowance of smokable marijuana, or flower as it's called, to be prescribed for medical purposes.
Raw flower is easy to process and the cost is significantly less.
The raw flower, grown by both LSU and Southern, along with a law passed last year to expand availability, made for an active first day at our region's dispensary.
It's been pretty busy, a little busier than normal because everybody has the rush over flowers available. People who couldn't participate in the program before, now they can because of cost-wise.
Also becoming effective is Senate Bill 34, stating that law enforcement agencies utilizing body cameras must have a policy for activation and deactivation. Alana Odoms of the ACLU of Louisiana says the legislation is a small step towards transparency.
What should be coming next are prescriptions around what happens if body cam footage is not properly turned over, what happens, as far as consequences to the officers, things of that nature. So right now, we're really just at the very beginning of reforms that are needed.
And while the law also addresses dash camera and chokeholds in policing, Odom says more law enforcement reform is needed in order that we prevent cases like that of Ronald Green and the state police.
What we're talking about here is the next phase of accountability, and that has to look like a series of reforms that go along with body camera footage.
In New Orleans, I'm LBJ.
Well, one Louisiana lawmaker is headed to a federal position after more than a decade serving the state legislature. President Joe Biden appointed State Representative Ted James to the U.S. Small Business Administration as the Regional 6th Director. James has been a major player at the state capitol since he was first elected in 2011. He served as the chair of the House of Criminal Justice Committee and the leader of the Black Caucus.
There are so many opportunities that I see for small businesses as I've read and followed the president's plan to, number one, and most importantly, increase the percentages of small, minority, and women-owned businesses participating in our federal government.
James will officially resign from his current position on January 28th. He starts his new job 3 days later. An election is expected to be called in March to fill his seat. With the stroke of a pen, Governor John Bel Edwards corrected a 125-year-old wrong. Homer Plessy, convicted for violating the state's Separate Car Act of 1890, now has a clear record. LBJ has a look at Louisiana's first posthumous pardon.
Now, therefore, I, John Bel Edwards, Governor of the state of Louisiana, recognizing the heroism and patriotism of his unselfish sacrifice to advocate for and to demand equality and human dignity for all of Louisiana citizens, do hereby grant a full posthumous pardon for the above listed offenses to Homer A. Plessy.
And with the stroke of a pen, Governor John Bel Edwards set to make right the wrong of convicting Homer Plessy of violating the state's Separate Car Act of 1890.
What it says is even those things that were so fundamentally wrong can be made right.
Descendants of Plessy and Judge John Ferguson were on hand for the ceremony, and they say that Plessy's actions were the start of the 20th century fight for civil rights in America.
It really solidifies the fact that there's no disconnect from our activities today in civil rights and the activities that took place in the 1800s.
Let me be clear. Homer Plessy was no criminal. He was then and he is now a hero.
Former Louisiana Supreme Court Justice Burnett Johnson was the first African-American Chief Justice on the bench, oftentimes being the lone voice on injustice from that body, and she saw strength in Plessy's actions.
You can't be afraid to be the sole dissenter or the person who takes a stand.
Everyone on hand sought to turn a page on a time that was not Louisiana's finest hour.
Best day to plant this tree would have been 130 years ago, right? Second best day to plant this tree is today.
Again, that was LBJ reporting. One Louisiana State Police investigator involved in the Ronald Green case plans to retire early. State Police confirmed Sergeant Albert Paxton requested early retirement last week. Paxton testified at a Senate hearing on state police oversight last month. He said he's being investigated, quote, because I won't participate in the cover-up, I won't hide evidence, and I won't lie, end quote. He testified about past wrongdoing in his division. Paxton has served with the state police for almost 14 years. Well, turning now to our coronavirus coverage, Governor John Bel Edwards says the state is not starting off on a good note in the new year as the Omicron variant makes up nearly 100% of positive COVID cases. The state has surpassed where we were during the Delta surge, but health officials say there is good news. The Omicron variant makes you less sick, but it does spread fast. Positivity rates tripled in just 1 week. Hospitals are now seeing that impact. Emergency room volumes are up 17% statewide.
Just about everybody in the state now either has just had COVID, has it today, or knows somebody who does.
If an area, a state, or a parish has over 100 cases of COVID per 100,000 residents per week, that's enough to put them in the highest risk category. We have 10 times that.
Governor Edwards says he's not looking to issue a mask mandate right now. Dr. Cantor says the state should receive more tests and COVID-19 treatments in the coming weeks. Well, after the break, we take a look back on the dark day of January 6th, what it means to our state's delegation, and what they'll be fighting for on Capitol Hill.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. January 6th is a day that many are not soon to forget. What people also won't forget is how elected officials acted in the days before and after the insurrection. Political reporter Shannon Hecht sat down with some of the Louisiana delegation to hear their take on the event.
Louisiana's delegation played their own roles in the historic day with supporters of former President Donald Trump tried to forcibly stop the election being certified.
And what happened on January 6th was one of the darkest days our country has ever seen.
Senator John Kennedy, as well as Representative Clay Higgins, Steve Scalise, Garret Graves, and Mike Johnson rejected at least part of the results. Senator Bill Cassidy was the only Republican member to vote to accept the results.
When politicians speak, people act. There's a responsibility for politicians to put civility in our political rhetoric. We can disagree, but we have to be able to discuss and debate differences.
Now, a year later, some Republican lawmakers see the investigation into the Capitol Hill riots as a political move for Democrats.
You also have to get out of the politicizing of this event that we've seen where they're coming in and trying to subpoena top administration officials that has nothing to do with the actual security.
Steve Scalise released a statement saying that people who participated in 2020 protests for racial justice should be held to the same standard as those who stormed the Capitol. Senator Kennedy echoed a similar sentiment. Following January 6th, Senator Cassidy once again was the only Republican of the delegation to vote to impeach former President Trump for his actions on that day. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht.
Senator Kennedy is still getting some pushback for voting to overturn the election after the insurrection. Kennedy has not openly conceded Biden's win. His political opponent for the 2022 Senate race, Luke Mixon, now slamming Kennedy for his actions. Mixon says the January 6th riot is one of the reasons he decided to run for Congress. He was angered by Senator Kennedy's vote and says there needs to be a fight for truth in Congress. Well, have you ever gotten stuck with a medical bill much higher than you were expecting due to an out-of-network service? Well, a new law penned partially by a Louisiana senator protects you from that. The No Surprises Act would prevent you from getting that extra charge if you were given out-of-network care without approval. In an emergency, you may be given life-saving care from a doctor or a machine that your insurance doesn't usually cover. But if you didn't sign off on it, you'd be shielded from the cost.
Those bills you get months after you go to the emergency room, You thought it was an in-network hospital. It was, but somebody was not in-network. You're getting billed separately, and it's far more than you thought you would have to pay.
The bill also requires providers to be upfront about any potential out-of-network services and what they will cost you. Looking ahead to the new congressional session, Louisiana's federal lawmakers are hoping to get things done for the American people this year. Democrat Representative Troy Carter says he will advocate for the voting rights bill that is taking a spotlight in Congress. Senator Bill Cassidy says there are some good parts to that legislation, but he sees it as a way to federalize elections. One of his main focuses, Social Security, which will be insolvent in just over a decade. Well, after the break, hear from more congressmen, in particular Garret Graves. He sits down with our Fred Childers to talk about why he's not done fighting for infrastructure dollars for Louisiana.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back to This Week in Louisiana Politics. Well, very shortly, lawmakers will be gathering in Washington, D.C. to write and pass laws that affect you right here in Louisiana. They'll do that through the second session of the 117th Congress. That is set to start January 10th. On Monday. We thought you might want to hear from one of the members of that body, so we've invited on Congressman Garret Graves. He's a Republican from Louisiana. He is in transit right now. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on.
You bet, Fred. Good to be with you again.
Yeah. So we know that there are a lot of goals going into this second session. We just wanted to get some of your thoughts. What are some of your main goals going into this session?
Look, I think we've got two primary themes that we're going to be working on this session. One of them is infrastructure, and Fred, you and I have talked about this a whole lot. But look, whether it's our flood protection infrastructure, our coastal infrastructure, or obviously our transportation, things like roads and bridges, we're not anywhere near where we need to be. So we're going to be continuing to work to try and secure funds to address those priorities. And the other real theme is security. And that's everything from border security to economic security, just to individual security, and getting us out of this crazy pandemic situation that we've been in for years now, that has had a profound impact on our economy and on really some of our just personal, I think, liberty or freedom.
Are you talking specifically about the vaccine mandates?
Well, Fred, it's everything from vaccine mandates to restricting people's inability to congregate and come together. Look, this is having profound impacts on our economy. I think it's having competitiveness issues. We've seen the supply chain issues that are impacting us. And I think that there's a better way to strike the right balance. I'm not saying that you throw everything out and bring everything back to how it was before. But I do think that as we learn more, as we have learned more about the virus, you've got to apply better science and better solutions, and not just come in and try and impose all sorts of restrictions and impediments on people's ability to just exercise their own individual freedoms and allow for our economy to prosper.
Well, let's drill down on that a little bit. We, talk about some of the effects that we've felt from the pandemic. Will there be laws? Are you aware of any legislation that will help businesses?
Well, we certainly have been able to provide billions of dollars in assistance and grants and loans, trying to focus on small businesses and trying to really incentivize them to keep employees on staff and to keep paying them. And so we are going to continue to look at which sectors may need assistance more than others. As you recall, early on, we were sort of trying to help out everybody. But now I think you've seen disproportionate impacts in some tourism and entertainment, some of the different travel-related industries, folks like that. So we're going to be looking, I think, a little bit more prescriptive solutions, rather than just coming out and offering it to everybody, but trying to identify those that are most impacted. But Fred, one of the things that you're seeing right now is you're seeing these record number of people that are quitting their jobs. And I think that you've seen, as a result of the pandemic, you've seen folks come in and people are getting paid more in some cases to not work than they were to actual work. And so you're seeing this growing divide between the number of jobs that are available and the number of people that have just chosen to not work. That's not okay. We can't have growing numbers of people leaving the workforce while you have growing numbers of jobs that are available or jobs that need to be filled.
What's the answer to that? How do you incentivize people getting back to work and filling those jobs?
Well, it's a great question. So one of the things that we did last year and year before is we did an employee retention tax credit to where employers would actually be incentivized to keep people on staff. We did the payroll coverage to where we offered grants in order to pay or cover the payroll of employees if you otherwise were unable to afford to do that. But what's happened is that they actually rescinded, the infrastructure bill rescinded the tax incentive. And you also have got to get rid of these programs that are incentivizing people to not work by paying them more to not work than they would make actually being in the workforce. That's just backwards. We can't be paying people to not work like that.
I wanted to switch gears here a little bit now. We're very close to the 1-year anniversary of the Capitol riots, what many are referring to as the January 6th insurrection. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the investigation by the House Select Committee.
Well, unfortunately, I think that the investigation really is a farce. And let me be clear. I think that you've got to thoroughly investigate everything that happened there, but you can't stop at just that. I think you've got to go back and even look at events like Congressman Steve Scalise getting shot, some of the riots and protests that occurred in Washington and Seattle and Portland and Chicago and other areas, and understand what is going on sort of in politics and from a much larger scale, and address those issues more comprehensively rather than trying to simply politicize one event. Let's keep in mind that there were warnings ahead of time that there were going to be protests, that there were going to be riots, that there were not proper precautions put in place. Why not? Why did the Capitol Police get outmanned in this case? Why did they not have the intelligence that they needed? Why wasn't it shared? Why didn't they have appropriate mitigation measures in place? I mean, look, there are all kinds of questions that have to be asked here, but it's a mistake to look myopically at just one event when there have been so many things that have happened over the past few years. And I think you also have to get out of the politicizing of this event that we've seen, where they're coming in and trying to subpoena top administration officials that has nothing to do with the actual security. If you're going to have a political investigation, fine, call it what it is, but it's not going to do anything to actually improve the security of our nation, which is what we need to focus on.
So you just listed a number of questions that you would like to ask. I know an interim report on the committee's findings is expected this summer. What do you expect from that report? Do you expect any answers to those questions you just listed?
Fred, unfortunately, I don't. I think it's going to end up being a political document. Look, you even had folks like the Inspector General for the Capitol Police that came in and made, as I recall, there was like 130 recommendations on things that needed to change or be improved. And I think it's been like 20% of those have actually been acted on. I mean, come on, look, if we're going to be serious about security, you're going to have to be serious about actually following through on the recommendations of the Inspector General and others to improve security. The fact that this committee has been hand-chosen, every member has been handpicked by Speaker Pelosi with no input from the Republicans leadership, I think it makes it crystal clear that this is just a political witch hunt. You're not going to see real actionable recommendations come out of this, and we're going to have to find another venue to have actual to build a focus on in a non-political way on what truly needs to be done to help to improve security and stabilize these crazy conditions.
All right, Congressman Graves, we know you're headed to Washington. In fact, I think your first vote's coming up on Tuesday. We'll be watching what you guys are doing up there. Thank you so much for coming on.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back with more This Week in Louisiana Politics.
This is your local election headquarters.
All right, we're looking ahead to this week. On Tuesday, all right, we're going to have to say goodbye, folks. Thank you so much for watching on this Sunday. For more news, head to brproud.com.